Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel Random Drop. And today I want to talk about Castlevania Nocturne Season 2. Let's get into it.
Hey everybody, before we get started, I just wanted to say if you enjoy our content and want to stay up to date with our videos, hit the subscribe button. It really helps the channel. Thanks. So, on to the video.
So I don't really review shows very often on this channel, but this is a video game adaptation and for a series that I really love. And since the original Castlevania series was so good, I, of course, continued on with Nocturne. Now I did review Nocturne Season 1 on this channel, and I was left off with, hey, that was pretty good. It kind of left me feeling how I felt with Season 3 of Castlevania, the original, as it felt like it was a lot of build-up, not a lot of payoff. And I appreciated the animation and the world and the references, but it didn't feel fulfilling. And that's kind of how I felt about Nocturne, is like, hey, I like what they're giving me here, the characters and whatnot, the world, but there was things like the villain I'm not really sold on, and some of the characters just kind of felt really as like they kind of shove a lot of characters at you in Season 1 of Nocturne, actually, compared to Season 1 of Castlevania. It's like two characters talking to each other most of the time. But here we are with Castlevania Nocturne Season 2, and my god, it's incredible. It is a complete payoff for all of the build-up in Season 1 and is an improvement in every way. Just how Season 4 ended, that's how I feel about Castlevania Nocturne Season 2, which Season 4 of Castlevania had some of the most immaculate fights and probably the best overall story of the series, and Nocturne completely elevates it in every way, making up for that really kind of lackluster Season 1. You can very much tell this was supposed to be a 16 episode series that they split up into 2 parts and spread out, as like the whole story arc makes sense as one complete arc now, and you don't have that weird middle ending of like, okay, it just ends in episode 8. And all the complaints I really had with like Season 1 get answered here. And what I really like about this season is the characterization and the payoff, specifically for characters like Maria and the main villains of this series. As with Maria, I found her design cool and how she fought cool, and I understood her backstory and whatnot and her motivations, but she felt a little bit one note in a lot of ways and didn't get much out of her. I am a complete Maria fan and stan now, just like Castlevania Season 1 converted me into a Sypha fan, as those are characters I just like never really cared about. They were always kind of like secondary and background characters in the game, and you know, they weren't the Belmont, right? They weren't Richter, they weren't Alucard, but this series just elevates those two women to incredible levels, and Maria is one of those. She is such a good freaking character and is a good addition to the family, really, the family of characters, as the Belmonts plus her feel like a cohesive unit and family. And yeah, I'm just totally in love with that character, and I can't wait to see what she does next. By the time this ended, I was ready to be like, put on your Symphony of the Night outfit, let's fucking go. Super excited to see more of Maria in the future. And then, like I mentioned, the villains got a big glow up. It's spoilers, right? And that's maybe something I can get into the spoiler talk. A lot of the issues I had with Season 1 was they always mention this villain, and then the villain comes and they're all powerful, and then it's just kind of that, and like I didn't understand fully, like, wait, who is she? Where did she come from? Why does she have those powers? And so forth. All that gets answered here, and I found the answers satisfying enough to where, hey, I was like, okay, hey, I can believe that in this world. This is how all this happened. And pacing wise, it lined it up very well so that it was easy for you to figure out. The biggest disappointment with Season 1 was obviously the lack of Alucard, as it is Richter's story, but everyone was always wondering, like, we know Alucard's in this world. Symphony of the Night still has to happen in this world. Where the fuck is he? All this is happening. And then, of course, at the very last episode of Season 1, Alucard shows up and murders the fuck out of Drolta. And it's such an incredible and awesome moment, but the show just ends there, right? And it's such a weird ending point, as it feels like, oh, we're about to get to the good part, and it is that. Season 2 is the good, incredible part, as Alucard adds this whole dynamic that was totally missing from Season 1, but you kind of understand why he couldn't be in Season 1, as if Alucard was there from the beginning, all of these problems would have been solved immediately. A lot of this happened because he was just late, and he does apologize sometimes, being like, yeah, I was fucking late, I messed up. And they do go into like, hey, what has he been doing, and where has he been at, why was he late, and all that sort of stuff. And it's a satisfying enough answer to be like, okay, hey, things got out of hand and times have changed, so there's this whole other thing happening. And it kind of builds up on like, hey, what are vampires in this world, and how does it relate to our history as it's a weird thing where as the show is doing real world history, but it's like this alternate universe where vampires and magic exist. So our history is still happening, but they like plopped in vampires and magic into the world, and everyone's aware that these are things that do exist. So when a vampire and a demon come walking around, people aren't like, they're weirded out by it, but they're not surprised by it. They're like, oh yeah, that's a vampire, that's a demon man. So it's a really like interesting alternate world, and it's funny that's like going through real world history, as this is focused on the French Revolution. But I did enjoy those bits, and it makes me wonder like, oh yeah, I want to see more of this type of stuff. And it just makes me excited to see how this world changes and turns as time goes on. What is the American Revolution with magic like? Things like that. So hey, interesting things that could be happening in the future. The show in itself ends satisfying, as the show hasn't been renewed yet for another season. So they had to cap this off, and this ends in a way where like, hey, if they don't make any more of these, it's totally fine. It ends in a good and satisfying way, but they leave little nuggets to be like their Symphony of the Night. If they're given another season, this is where we're headed. And I'm absolutely excited about it, as Symphony of the Night is the game. It is the game that blew up Castlevania into this mainstream popular thing, and it's one of the greatest games actually ever made. It laid out the blueprint for so many games in the future, and to watch a show that is focused on Alucard, with Richter kind of more taking the backseat and maybe focusing on Alucard and Maria. I don't know. The story is really old by now, so they're gonna probably have to make some changes, but the idea is still there, right? That it is focused mainly on Alucard and him having to deal with the castle coming back. Sorry, spoilers for Symphony of the Night. We don't know how it's gonna turn out if it does come out, so it's not really spoilers, but that is what that game is about. It is about Castlevania returning. And one thing I really want to get through is that the action is elevated to another level with this season. It is some of the best. Now, Castlevania, the original series, or the original 4 seasons, has some incredible action, and it's not like this is any worse. There are some that I think are legitimately better, but there's just so many good ones. Every single one is a banger. They just like don't fail at it, and you can tell they're just getting better and better at animating it. As I really like when you look at a fight, you can see them fight and think of their next move, and it makes sense why they're doing what they're doing, and they've already used that power set before, and it makes sense how they're using that power set. So as you're watching it flow in action, you're like, oh, you see so and so use ice to make little steps as he walks around to dodge attacks and so forth. Like, there's just the way it's so intricately animated and thought out, and you can catch little things on multiple watches. It's fucking incredible, man. I haven't been so satisfied for like a final fight in a series in a very long time, as episode 7 is the ultimate fight for the series. And season 4's fight was like okay, but it was super like God of War and like giant, right? And like it kind of just didn't make sense, right? It was kind of on a scope that was like way too high, and it's like hard to imagine like Richter really fighting that thing, or I'm sorry, not Richter, Trevor really fighting the very end of season 4. But the final fights here and the way it's choreographed and whatnot, just God, it's so satisfying. It's just awesome how they beat the shit out of that villain, and how the villain fights back too, right? It is not a quick and easy fight. It is down, dirty, and brutal, and all out, and it's really good, man. It's one of the best ever, I think. The only real complaint I have with season 2 is like there's some side plots that just like didn't land with me, or I felt like were filler, not really needed. And it just makes me wonder why they were there at all, or maybe they were there just to like set up things in the future. But that's something we can get into the spoilers real quick. But all in all, hey, my review of Nocturne season 2 is that if you've watched Nocturne season 1, you need to watch season 2. It is an absolute payoff for everything you watched in season 1. And even though maybe you left season 1 a little bit sour and a little bit disappointed, after like episode 1 or 2, you'll be like, oh, I don't care anymore. That is gone. And especially there's a certain scene with Maria where you're just like, this show's fucking awesome. I need to see the very end of this. So, hey, Castlevania Nocturne in itself, the complete package is totally worth the watch. And if you're someone who's like loves animation and loves like combat animation, especially, holy shit, this is just like the peak of the peak. It is so goddamn good. It's up there with some of the best. I'm never gonna get tired of watching gifs of this shit. But now let's get into the spoilers, as I'm gonna kind of talk about, hey, what I think the future is gonna be. and like what things I noticed, and hey, what are some like those story beats I didn't really like, and mainly is like the demon plot. I already forgot the singer's name, but he's the singer that turned into a demon, and from the very beginning you can tell, right, like what it's building up to, and it's like, hey, his voice is like unlocking things in these demons and they're becoming a bit more humanized, and it does lead to certain characters doing things like reviving Drolta with the machine. As it's revealed, they figure out, oh, the soul actually does stay in there and it's not gone. These aren't just like mindless freaks, they are still the original person. So it leads the main villain to be like, well, we'll revive Drolta. She says, just use the damn machine, and it ends up working out. But other than that, that demon plotted there is to, I really don't know, right? They do the whole like revolution inside of the demon, but like even during like the last ultimate battle, like there's never a scene of the vampires noticing that they got betrayed or anything like that. They just like the demons fight amongst themselves and that's it. And then it leads with him going back with Trevor, and then at the end, so maybe it's a thing where like, hey, he's gonna be a future character and they just wanted to build him up. But for the most part, he just like didn't really have much to do and just felt overall inconsequential to like the overall plot. They didn't spend too much time on him, thankfully. It's just something that we're just like, yeah, I feel like it just didn't really add much for me. Let me know if I'm wrong. And same with Orlox and Mizrak. Even though I like their chemistry and like what they're going for with that plot line, it just leaves me to wonder like, why is Orlox around? Because like it's even like the villains kind of wonder like, where the fuck are you going all the time? What are you even doing here? Like, I understand, and I don't even remember or understand why they even called Orlox to come. Is there a very special reason or what or why? But yeah, it just like really makes no sense to me. As like he's like the only vampire ambassador, like he's the only one from America, and like there's no other real vampire ambassadors or anything like that. So it doesn't seem like that. So Orlox is kind of just like wandering around doing his own fucking thing, and it just doesn't make sense that like they wouldn't figure him out immediately, as he just doesn't really do anything and it's just floating around. So it just makes you wonder why the villains even called him there to begin with, and his overall story just doesn't really add much other than like the theme of saving someone they loved, and like Richter giving them that line that I'll kill you one day but not this time, just like he did to him when he was a kid, and so forth, right? It's just, that stuff is cool. Like there's a lot of cool ideas with the Mizrak and the Orlox stuff, but again, I just feel there's like some big ass plot holes with it. Really, it's like kind of how I feel by the end of it, honestly. But I do like those characters. I do hope to see more of them in the future. And yeah, and I really think the next thing is be Castlevania Symphony of the Night, as death is a big part of Symphony of the Night, and clearly there's like a shadowy figure that is making deals, and he looks like Satan, right? Because he has 3 heads, and you know, in Dante's Inferno, the devil has 3 heads and whatnot, right? And it just has that imagery. Then he turns into other figures that kind of represent the same thing, like the dirty dealer and whatnot. But it seems like, hey, it might just be death without his physical form, and he's just kind of rebuilding himself through deals and more death and whatnot. Because after what Trevor did to him, probably had like a reset button hit, basically. But I imagine that's going to lead into whatever's next, which would be Symphony of the Night. One thing I'm wondering is if Mizrak is evil, as whenever Orlox looks at him at the end, he has those red eyes and he looks fucking furious. So I don't know, like him turning him into a vampire drove him mad, but he did give off that vibe of like when he was standing there just like looking throughout the window, like he gave me evil vampire vibes, like even like a stand-in for like I imagine maybe what they could do with like the Dracula thing in Symphony of the Night is like use him as like a fake stand-in for Dracula, as like maybe they look very similar or something like that, and people believe is Dracula. I don't know, but it seems like Mizrak may be like a main villain or a big plot point in the next one. And yeah, in terms of like Dracula coming back for the next one, especially how season 4 ends, I imagine they're gonna have to like do a clone or like some sort of ritual to make a fake, but like Dracula wasn't actually ever there or whatnot. But Castlevania coming back and his father being inside of it and whatnot is kind of just more of a plot to fuck with Alucard than anything. And I think that would probably be more interesting, as I mean Dracula's plot line is kind of resolved, so just there's no real reason for him to come back and be evil other than someone made like a secondary, like a shadow form of him or something like that. But yeah, man, Castlevania Nocturne just reminds me how cool the Castlevania series is, and it just makes me mad that there's not good Castlevania games coming out anymore. There's so much like prime real estate in this series, especially like these characters are doing such cool moves that you're like, oh man, I bet like that would be an ability he would do in this tree if you could spec into it or something like that. or it's something he would unlock through the journey as they use like different weapons and things and abilities, like they unlock them or something. Especially Alucard's like, I've been on a journey, I've got new shit, and he's like pulls out some fucking daggers. Oh man, it's so good. So, and he also mentions that he was in Japan and things like that. That like gives the options to be like, hey, they're setting up the other Castlevania game plot line so that if they wanted to do like a side or a spin-off, they could do that. So that's interesting as well. But yeah, man, hey, how do you feel about Castlevania Nocturne Season 2, Nocturne overall? Leave a comment down below, like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you on the next random drop video. Peace.